The Pentagon is releasing and declassifying numerous files on UFOs. This includes eyewitness testimony, photos, and reports of sightings of unexplained objects, like this photo right here. Government knowledge of non-human intelligent life was the subject of the documentary The Age of Disclosure, released back in November. The filmmakers spoke to 34 high-level U.S. government, military, and intelligence insiders.
We've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities, and it's not ours.
These are otherworldly things that are performing maneuvers that haven't been seen.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
Even presidents have been operating on a need-to-know basis, but that begins to ramp out of control.
Okay, I want to bring in Dan Farah, the director and producer of The Age of Disclosure. Dan, great to see you again. We talked to you when your film first came out. Great to have you back. Shortly after your film came out, though, President Trump issued a historic directive to declassify evidence, and the first trace of evidence just came out today. Did you think we'd see this kind of disclosure from the government when you started making this film?
Yeah, look, the hope for the film was that it would create a national conversation that led to unprecedented government action, and that's exactly what happened. I think we're at a major turning point in human history and U.S. history right now, and I'm super proud of the role the film's playing in that. It was less than 3 months after the film's release that Trump issued that presidential directive to declassify evidence of non-human intelligent life and UAP, previously referred to as UFOs, and that was middle of February, and here we are not long after, and the first tranche of evidence being declassified was released today. All my relationships inside of government have made it clear to me that this is just the federal government tipping their toe in the water. There's going to be a number of more tranches of evidence released, and as time goes on, it'll be even more significant evidence released.
Did you learn anything new from these files that were just released?
Yeah, I learned some new stuff, but also it was great to see things that I knew existed finally get released. So amongst the evidence released today is a photo from the 1972 Apollo mission that shows a triangular craft, a structured craft, hovering above the moon and the astronauts on the mission in 1972. I've been told by a number of the sources in my film that existed over the last few years. So seeing that released today, I think that's very significant.
Now, you spoke to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle for this documentary. Here's a clip of two of them sharing how they feel about the information that they know. Take a look.
We've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities, and it's not ours, and we don't know whose it is. That alone, just that statement alone, deserves inquiry, deserves attention.
Rubio and I are aligned 100%. We do not find it acceptable to have unknown aerial phenomenon.
It's just not an issue, at least as of yet, in this country that lends itself to some sort of partisan or ideological divide.
Now, Marco Rubio, now the Secretary of State, and in the middle of some pretty big global events. Have you talked to him since making this film? Is he part of the behind the scenes of releasing these new files?
He's definitely a part of the process behind the scenes. Marco Rubio has been an incredible champion for disclosure behind the scenes, and participated in my film and helped open the public's eyes to the extent of this cover-up. But most people don't know the extent to which he's been involved behind the scenes. He's the force behind almost every big milestone for disclosure we have seen.
And you actually have some knowledge of the fight between government agencies over the release of these documents. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so President Trump gave this directive in the middle of February, and then what followed that was the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and several other cabinet members getting tasked with going and finding where this evidence exists, and then getting access to it, and then determining what can safely be declassified and what would not be a threat to national security if shared with the public. And they faced a lot of pushback from various intelligence agencies and branches of the military that did not want to release the evidence they had. And so there's been this significant tug of war happening behind the scenes. And what has shaken out of that is a treasure trove of evidence. And today was the first release of some of it. But they're continuing to try to wrestle this evidence out of the hands of various intelligence agencies so that they can release more in the coming months. And I'm told there's going to be a lot more released in the near future.
What do you make of the timing of this release, though, Dan? Many feel like it's meant as a distraction from the war in Iran, high gas prices, things that are not favorable to this administration. Do you believe in that, or do you think the timing is completely coincidental?
No, I don't think it's a cover for anything. This has been a process that's been unfolding for almost 10 years now. While I was making the film, a number of the interview subjects I interviewed participated in historic congressional hearings to bring about transparency on this topic. The release of the film was a major milestone for disclosure. We knew and hoped it would lead to a big presidential action. That's what happened in February. This is just the natural, ripple effects of that directive being put in motion. I do know, the Secretary of War, the Director of National Intelligence, key cabinet members are all over this, and they want to make as much possible for the American people in terms of transparency.
Yeah, you mentioned that you believe the government's sort of dipping its toe, so to speak, in releasing some of these files. So what else do you think we're going to learn? What else is going to be released that's really going to shock people?
So look, the big headlines revealed in my film are that there's been an 80-year cover-up of the existence of non-human intelligent life, that elements of the US government have been retrieving crashed craft of non-human origin since the 40s and been gatekeeping this information, hiding it from the American public, Congress, and even sitting presidents. So that's the headline, the biggest cover-up in human history. Also revealed in my film is that those same people that have been gatekeeping this information have been involved in a high-stakes, secret Cold War race with adversarial nations like China and Russia to reverse engineer this technology of non-human origin. And it's referred to by a number of high-level people in my film as the Manhattan Project on steroids. The stakes couldn't be higher. Those headlines are certainly now out there thanks to what my interview subjects went on the record about. But I think we're going to learn a lot more about that. And I think we're eventually going to get to a place where we see a sitting president step to the microphone and tell the world, we are not alone. The US government has known about this for many years. We are in this high stakes secret Cold War race. It'll probably be a speech similar to Kennedy's famous speech he gave at Rice University when we entered the space race. And he said very thoughtfully that space technology, like nuclear technology, has no conscience of its own. It's up to mankind whether it's used for good or evil. And that is why it was important that the US led in the space race, so we could make sure that that technology is used for the betterment of all mankind and not to create a new sea of war. A similar speech is likely to happen on this, because this is technology. These UAP are displaying abilities, technology that could revolutionize the way we live. It could solve the energy crisis. It could change our lives in many, many ways. But it could also be used to create weapons of mass destruction. And so it's really imperative that we as a nation keep this it's now a national priority. It needs to remain a national priority, and we need to put the right resources and brain power towards it. And I think it's going to take a presidential speech like that to just do a level set with the American public and let them know what's going on, what's at stake, and why it has to remain a priority.
How does this relate to the space race that's happening between the U.S. and, say, China and Russia? Is it related? Are they looking into similar pieces of evidence?
Yeah, China and Russia have very active programs to investigate UAP, to retrieve crashed UAP, to try to reverse engineer this technology. Yeah, it truly is a high-stakes secret Cold War race.
Because there's a lot of skeptics who believe that these unidentified flying objects are nothing more than flying objects created by our adversaries that are hoping to gain more information about our own capabilities, militarily or surveillance capabilities. What do you make of that theory?
I mean, look, everyone I interviewed in my film was on the same page with regard to that. They all felt that if an adversary like China had leapfrogged us technologically by decades, as this technology would suggest, that's the biggest intelligence failure in the history of the U.S. government.
The film is called The Age of Disclosure, and you can watch it worldwide on Prime Video for purchase or rent. Dan Farah, great to see you again. Don't be a stranger. I'm sure we'll be calling you back as more of these files are eventually released by the government. But great to see you.
Thank you. You too.